first one, or?
Okay. All right, so today we're gonna, since this is the Friends of Taunton Bay, the Taunton Bay is right out there, we're gonna be talking about protecting water quality and what you can do in your own garden, to, and your landscape to help keep the water quality good. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was erosion. I love this quote, we don't have a runoff problem, we have an infiltration problem. So that means that things like roofs, impervious surfaces like roofs and roads and all of these things us humans have developed in the landscape are causing problems because we've taken up all this space and we're not allowing the rainwater to infiltrate. So it's being collected on the roofs and then it's like gushing off in a torrent, which causes various kinds of erosion problems. So also we have to think about the fact that if you have like a waterfront property, you're probably collecting water from the problems upstream as well. Not just the rain that's falling on your property, but little streams and brooks and even runoff off the road is maybe being multiplied on its way toward your property. So it's really important that you think about some strategies to fix some of the erosion problems that you might be seeing. So, okay, let's go.
Okay. So we're just gonna bounce back and forth. These are just examples of some things that are ready to be problems. So on the lower left, you have a construction site where the soils are bare and compacted and almost as hard as a driveway or some paved road. So that's a place where water will quickly run off and cause some erosion problems below. If you're driving in wet fields, you can develop these track marks that may become ditches and where water collects, and then it becomes a cavern soon after a few storms. And also a repeated kind of traffic on a lawn just creates a compacted soils in general, and it's hard for things to grow. And again, it becomes a place where becomes an impervious surface. So those are just examples of things to avoid.
And then this is a problem that a lot of people have and might not even really be tuned into, but a lot of houses have a perimeter drain system that's keeping the water from getting into your basement. And where that drain sees daylight, all of that water is concentrated. And in this case, it's concentrated about 30 feet from the shoreline. So that can certainly be causing a problem again. And so we're going to address some solutions.
And here's another example of a perimeter drain where you can see at one point that drain was probably just a few inches showing daylight from, it's pretty typical for a drain to be dug underground and emptying on your shore. And there's an example of some, a problem that did not get helped by the fact that perimeter drain was there emptying things out. And you can, if you look at where it's carved out, it's where the perimeter drain is. And if you look to the left, that that land is more intact. So there's another issue that we should be aware of.
So how many people know where their perimeter drain leaves?
Yeah.
A few, but it should be everybody. You should be thinking about where is that water going, because there is no more like away anymore. It can't just go away. It's always going somewhere. So we want to talk about a couple of strategies to help mitigate all that water moving over the landscape. Doing some things closer to the source are going to help that from reaching the shore and and accelerating the impact of the shoreline erosion. Oh, it's raining. Speaking of which, you can see where that goes. So anyway, some strategies to improve infiltration. We basically want to slow the water down, and so using a swale or a ditch that's slanted can be one really important way to do that.
This is kind of a diagram of what we were just looking at. It's referred to as a bioswale, and it's basically a ditch that allows the surface water to soak into the earth slowly, and and the plant life the plants that are in that swale are part of the reason why the water's slowing down and getting absorbed, and in some cases even cleaning the water as it's running through the ditch. So you can see how there are ways to create, sort of engineer, and it doesn't have to be like rocket science, to kind of figure out a way to put the soils in so that they'll be sandy and easy to drain out, and use the plants that are capable of handling flooding situations and also dry situations, because it's not always going to be wet. So there are a lot of resources online that give you instructions for creating a bioswale. But basically, by the time it gets to your shore, it's the water, there's very little water left, and it's pretty much infiltrated into the soils below.
And so I just want to point out one thing on this diagram, just that this is a more engineered system than you might really need. So there is a perforated pipe and then a drain for overflow. A lot of times you don't really need that. That's kind of overkill in the kind of situations we typically have around here. If it's sized properly, you're not going to have like the overflow.
Right.
So here are a couple of examples. Like on the left, that's the front of a house where the roof is sloping. There are no gutters on that house, so the rain is just coming right from the gutters onto the landscape. So this is a little swale that was created with rocks and plants so that the water is slowed down as it moves. The shore is toward the bottom of the picture there, so that's the direction that the water is moving. And the rocks definitely slow down the flow, and the plants do as well. And the plants are also keeping the soil in place at the same time. And the picture on the right, this was actually a path to the shore that had been eroded down by use over the years. And this was kind of a really quick strategy to arrest that erosion by filling that channel with wood chips and using those logs as kind of water bars to move the water off to the side and into the other parts of the landscape and slow it down where there are plants.
And this is another kind of like the water bars. This is another way of handling erosion. This is a part of a construction still. It's under construction. So the erosion control mulch, which is basically a ground up wood stumps from stumps that they grind, and it kind of has the fiber knits together. So it's an approved erosion control material that you can use. It slows down the water. And in this case, these berms are helping to direct the water that's coming down this slope into the more wooded area, and eventually those wood chips will decompose. They are as they decompose, they're going to be building the soils with a lot of fungi, and that area will get planted and revegetated. So it's kind of acting as an erosion control and a soil builder at the same time.
Okay, so the idea of the rain garden is a similar situation where once the water is channeled to a basin that can be planted, and then it can sit there and infiltrate into the ground. So in this case, the water is coming from the roof, through the gutters, into the rain garden where it can slowly seep into the ground and move into the bay. On the other side, you can see where the car is, how if you had a drain on the driveway, the water carrying oils and things from vehicles would go directly into that drain and come directly out with no filtration into the bay. So the plants are doing all of that filtration work. Plants and the soil and the microbes in the soil are working really hard to clean the water. So basically, you just need to get the water to a place that you can have some kind of a basin that will hold the water long enough for it to infiltrate.
And if you're, you need to test the areas that you're doing that, because a lot of times there's groundwater on the land. So there, again, if you look at resources online, they have instructions about digging a hole 12 inches deep, filling it with water, and timing to watch how fast the water flows in the soil and drains in that hole. That gives you an idea that that's an okay place for a rain garden. And try to keep it away from the house a certain distance and your septic field. So this is, now we're in a place where some of the native plants that we can be used in some of these strategies. These are plants that can take the conditions that are in a swale or a rain garden. So we'll start just showing you some of the native plants. I guess we could just go through this quickly because we want to make sure we have time for questions and answers.
Yeah. So these are plants that like wetlands, that don't mind having wet feet. So I know the lobelia, the cardinal flower is a popular one, and that hummingbird is very attractive. Like, we all want to have hummingbirds in the garden. The Meadow Roo is another plant. There, it's in the wild situation, so you can see it's like in a stream bed, but this will do perfectly well in any kind of garden. And when you're thinking of the rain garden plants, you don't necessarily need plants that are only adapted to wet situations. You just need ones that can tolerate it for a little while the water is infiltrating.
Right, and winter conditions too with wet feet, that's another consideration. So here's a couple other examples of the swamp milkweed. And again, because it's called swamp milkweed, but that can live in a regular soil in a regular garden as well. And these plants, can be in other gardens. But again, they're fine to have wet feet for periods of time. The spotted Joe pieweed is a nice tall plant to use in a lot of situations.
Great, and pollinators love those plants too. And so, of course, all of our asters, pretty much. There's a few that like it drier, but the New York aster is one that really likes it wet. New England aster is one that can work really well. And some others in this blue vervain. It will seed around a lot. It's a really beautiful plant with a very tall stature.
Here, some shrubs, our understory trees, I should say, our shad or serviceberry is, the first thing we see blooming in the spring, and it's always kind of a treat. And the high bush blueberry is another understory tree that can live in wet soils and in the shade as well.
And there's our native swamp azalea, which, it's really a beautiful plant, and it blooms a lot later than all the cultivated azaleas. So that's also a nice thing. It sort of blooms after that big spring flush.
And has a delicious smell.
Right.
Our two of our native roses that do quite well, you often see them in ditches. The ditch is kind of a bioswale in a way. So you can think about what you find on the roadside ditches when you're driving around. So these are two, both of them can tolerate these conditions. They're very similar, and they have wonderful hips that last all winter into the winter and can feed a lot of birds.
And then the sweet gale, that's often found in freshwater wetlands on the edge of lakes, but it also is quite salt tolerant. And then the winterberry holly, which is wonderful visually and great for habitat.
Okay, so here's our poster child. This is what can happen, and we see a lot of this, to be honest. We get a lot of phone calls to come look at people's shores. So a lot of this has to do with upland management, and as it says in the slide, your property is on the shore. You're at the very base of a long slope, going miles and miles away. It's all coming at you, and we find a lot of times on these shores that there's a lot of groundwater. It's not just surface water, and it's also not just wave action. There's often a lot of seepage, and so the groundwater is not getting absorbed as it's coming down that long slope, and there's often, like where the ledge is, that rock bed or different soil types, it's kind of like a slide underground, and where it starts to seep, then we see these slumping actions on the shore. So that's why we feel like upland management is so important when you're thinking about your shore.
So in the left-hand picture, there's this big field with just a little line of trees at the shore. Well, really, that's not enough when this can happen after one storm. So you really have to think about how to fortify that shore with vegetation.
And here's another example of a shoreline. Again, how the one line of trees on that edge is really not a real defense, and you can see how that one line of trees can slowly get exposed and be not function anymore as holding the bank.
So I just thought we'd mention a little about the shoreline zoning and how important it is that people follow the rules and understand that there are rules if you want to do things on the shore. So any kind of soil disturbance that you're thinking of on your shoreline, that all requires a permit. So, and really anything within 75 feet of the shore needs to have a permit, either your shoreline zoning permit or through the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. You might need 2 permits to put a stairway to the beach, for example.
In the town.
Yeah, the town,
Yeah.
that's the shoreline zoning, and then
Oh.
the state DEP.
Right. So this is one of many strategies to vegetate a slope, and in this picture we're using wattles and live stakes as a way to, the wattles act like those water bars in a sense, and the live stakes can actually be used as stakes, living stakes that you put in the ground to hold the wattles in place, and those live stakes will root and become shrubs or trees. And then you can see on the picture on the right where it's a coconut fiber mat is used to help where there's bare soils. We seed underneath that, so that is like an erosion control blanket, and it will biodegrade within 12 or 18 months depending on the rating, and those stakes that are holding that in place are all live stakes.
If you're thinking of using wattles and live stakes, it's really a timing thing. So the only time they're really available is in the spring, and a lot of times you need to order them in the winter too. But the thing is, they're very inexpensive, so you can put a lot of them in and hope that you get some good coverage. It's difficult to water them though on the slope like that, so they're usually you don't get 100% success. So some of the species that are available are up there in the left, like the buttonbush, we showed you the photo earlier, a couple kinds of dogwoods. Elderberry is a really good one, viburnum, and a couple different species of willows. So the wattle is like a bundle of brush, kind of, that has been clipped off. It's still alive. You get it. It's dormant. You install it, and then in April, May, and then it starts to grow.
And here's a little more involved shoreline work. All these methods we call living shoreline strategies, and it's using vegetation and softer materials rather than the riprap that is more typical, and they're discovering that the riprap is not a very good solution. It often pushes the waves to the edges and it affects the neighboring shores, and if they're not planted, they don't have a long stability. They're not stabilizing the soils really, they're just armoring that spot. So here is a situation where you can do a hybrid of sometimes using rocks, and there are coconut fiber mats that are rolled into and filled with the planting medium. And so you can see in this particular instance that someone is planting live plants directly into those core fiber rolls and the soils.
So these kind of techniques can even be used in the upland if you want to like divert water using these coconut fiber rolls and then using them and then planting into them, so they can raise up a little bit above the surface and use that like instead of a berm to direct the water in a certain direction.
Right. In fact, they used it at Frenchman's Bay at the Tidal Falls.
Yeah.
And that landscape, they were having erosion problems, and we suggested that be used, and it seems like it's been working there.
So if you want to find out more information about like living shorelines and techniques and methods for implementing them, this publication can be found online called Building Resiliency Along Maine's Bluff Coastline. Came out in 2017 by the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that's a great resource. And here, I think the next one.
Yeah, this shows in that it's like a PDF catalog publication, and they have lists of plants and the tolerance to salt and wave size and all you can see that those columns. So it gives you a lot of information using a lot of mostly native plants to me, and you'll find this is a really great source.
So this is just showing grasses that will work, but there's pages for herbaceous things, shrubs, trees, all of that. So I think it's a really great resource, especially because it came from Maine. So it's talking about the plants that we can either get or are growing native around here. So this is just an example of like a well-vegetated upland. So instead of having a big open view at the shore, in this case there's a couple of layers of trees, and then there is this low carpet of blueberries and other shrubs, and then the lawn is behind that, which is directly surrounding the home.
And this is kind of the opposite of that, where people want the lawn going straight to the water and the woods are behind it. And so it's much better to have those layers of things and kind of staging the surface water and the groundwater as it's reaching the shoreline.
So in this case, it was lawn practically right up to the edge of the bank, and they were concerned about the bank. So we did a bunch of planting about 15 feet out from the bank as sort of like the first phase to give them the next line of defense. So we chose shrubs and woody plants that are going to have a variety of different root systems. We're going to talk more about that later. And currently there's like mulch in between those shrubs, but that's like a temporary thing just to help those shrubs get started. They're going to grow into a big mass all together and be wonderful wildlife habitat at the same time. And we'll talk about some species that will work for that too.
Okay, so this is just stuff to think about when you're getting ready to consider the plants you might want to choose. And like Cathy just said, root structure is really important, because there are things that have fibrous roots that are shallow, and things that have long tap roots, and things that have long fibrous roots and deep roots. So to get that combination of things will really help stabilize the soils. And of course, just like any garden, what's the habit, bloom time, the foliage. The bloom time also relates to the pollinators giving a long season of bloom, and then screening and transitioning from a more domestic landscape into the native landscape beyond it.
So I just want to show some of the different root systems. So a tap root is on the upper left there. Next to that is more of a fibrous root system, and then on the right is an adventitious root system. So there are species that have one or the other. So of these, so a combination of things, some with the deeper roots, some with more spread out roots, and some that are rooting along as they grow is important. So this diagram on the lower right shows like a grass. A is a grass and B is an immature oak. I found this very interesting. And B is the immature oak, and C is a mature beech and oak. So it's interesting that in its life cycle, at one point it's going to have more roots when it's growing than when it becomes a mature tree. And then D, this is a typical system for a pine. And then E is what I was just talking about with the adventitious roots somewhat. So these roots are really spread out horizontally. And then new plants are going to be arising out of that root. So things like cherry, hawthorn, those are really great plants for creating like a thicket and a really strong but shallow root system.
Okay, and so this is an example of a landscape that is really thinking about the layers. It's really good to maintain all the kind of those layers, not just in the roots, but also above ground. And so we'll just talk a little bit more about that, but you can see that you can do this a lot just with editing. You don't have to plant everything.
Right, it's more about like kind of taking away for aesthetic value, and then keeping those layers so that every layer gets some light. So in this case, the couple of ground covers are the twin flower on the upper right and the foam flower on the lower right. And then, so here it's more in a more, non-natives are involved in this garden as well, but you can see there's like woods, there's like taller shrubs, there's herbaceous foliage at various layers. So with all of those different root systems in the same place, they're really absorbing a lot of the water and preventing runoff.
So this is just some more examples of some of the native plants that we have to choose from, and here is the dogwood, the pagoda dogwood or alternative leaf dogwood. It's a really lovely understory tree, and with berries and pollen for birds and blooms for pollinators, and a beautiful structure as well.
So when you're thinking about that above ground, you're thinking the same thing, like what shape is going to work with that underneath it. So in this case, we have the witch hazel. Unfortunately, this one is pretty grown out in the sun, but often that has more of like a vase shape if it's in some shade, and there's plenty of room underneath it for more layers of planting. And of course, it has those wonderful flowers in like November.
Some plants actually can do a lot of work for you in the garden, like the nitrogen fixing plants to build soil. And so we have in the right the speckled alder and the bayberry both do that. And in this situation, this is actually at the native garden. In this situation, we're hoping the alder will be the dominant tree. We're actually seeing it as our specimen tree in that landscape, and the bayberry underneath will be pruned to maintain sort of that understory under the alder, and we'll be shaping and pruning the alder to have, creates,
Adventitious
but
root.
I'm thinking
Like a
there's another
network,
word.
though,
There's
too.
another word that
It's
we
clonal.
often, clonal, but yeah. And then it just, it suckers up, that's the other
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
Sometimes people use in the garden, that's what I was looking for. Anyway, it's a great roadside plant, can take salt, can actually really take salt. It's a good plant if you're gonna know that someone's salting the road.
Or
nearby.
you need something right on the shore.
Yeah, or you need something, right.
So some other strategies to improve the soil and improve the organic matter in the soil. The more organic matter you have in the soil, the more water it's going to be able to hold. So using some brush to make a habitat berm on the left, and on the right, this was a workshop at the Native Garden where we were using a lot of different things that we had available to improve the soils in a part of the garden that was formerly a parking lot. So a gravel parking lot. So we put sticks and leaves and straw and seaweed, and a little bit of soil got mixed in there, I think. And so this was a number of years ago, and now we're ready to plant into that area, reclaiming the parking lot.
And sometimes you have brush and you have too much brush and you want to do something more decorative or ornamental feeling intentional with the way you manage your brush. So you can, in this situation, we were making a kind of a line in the woods that could be sculptural, and it also acts as habitat for cover for birds and also microbes. So it's going to help build the soil in those woods as it decays.
Okay, and so then the last thing is how to get plants, because we know that native plants aren't necessarily the most available in your local nursery. So one thing you can do is sort of just celebrate what you already have on your property. So prune it, groom it, make it look better. I mean, there's no reason you can't go out there and prune an alder to make it look more lovely to your eye. It still has, the root system is still doing its job. You can just make it nicer. In the case of alder, you could just whack it all the way down and even have it come back up and have a completely different shape. So there's a lot you can do with what you already have. And the next thing is to just transplant and divide what you have on your property, and just move things around so aesthetically they look better, and maybe they're a little bit more functional as far as those bioswales and things like that. And the next thing is to sort of collect seeds yourself or from your friends and neighbors and sow them yourself, and then you'll have tons of seedlings that you can plant and also give away. And then the last thing is to purchase like locally grown, sustainably grown plants, and the Native Garden's trying to help with that by having a plant sale every year. And this year we're going to have 2 plant sales. The second one is going to be in early September or mid-September, I guess. We haven't exactly decided on the date, so stay tuned for that. So we also have this nice guide on our website, which the arrow's showing. If you want like a list of native plants that we recommend for gardens, and some of them are more available than others, but it also gives you that information about how much water does it like and how much sunlight does it like. So, and that's another thing that's kind of, people don't really know it, but a lot of times plants that you find in the wild that are growing in some really specialized place, they're usually growing there because that's where they compete best. But if you take one of those plants, like a rhodora, for example, that beautiful rhodora that blooms like a Memorial Day weekend every year, and move that into a garden, as long as you're helping it compete well, it can thrive in a garden too. So we also like to push the limits of the native plants and get the ones we like and sort of mix it up a little. So there is some value in keeping things where they can compete best if you're a no maintenance kind of garden, but don't don't be afraid to push a limit sometime if you really want to try something. Go for it.
And one of our missions at the garden is really to promote local nurseries. So again, we're trying to really find more seed and grow things at the garden where people can come and collect seed of things that are not typical in the nursery trade, because there's kind of a palette of plants in the nursery trade, of native plants that are pretty standardized, and if you want something a little more unusual, we're trying to develop a palette of plants at the native garden that are less likely to be found in the nursery trade, and get our local growers to be growing them. So that's part of our mission. And this is the last slide with our website, so you can visit online or you can visit in person every other Friday, tomorrow being one of them. We have a volunteer morning, 9 to noon, and we call it sort of a mentoring day as well. People can come and help us work in the garden. The native garden is done entirely through volunteer efforts, and so we do rely on the community in that way, and also we try to give back by, Cathy and I are always there, and we're giving all our garden wisdom to everyone who comes. So, or if you just want to come see the gardens, we can give you a tour. So we're open for questions.
Yeah.
I have two, and then I'll let you move on. The button bush you were showing, is that plant that was being given away by the Hancock County USDA this spring?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. It could be if they
Okay.
had it. I'm always looking at that list. For some reason, I'm not getting their publications anymore.
Okay.
So I
My-
fell off.
My second question, you were showing the parking lot that was being redeveloped with seaweed and everything being brought in. You said now it's ready to be planted. Well, how long did that take for the?
I think that was about 4 years, the gravel parking lot at the native garden.
Oh,
I think it's about
right.
4 years.
4
and-
years for that to compost?
Yeah.
complete?
Well,
I mean, you could make it go a lot faster than that,
that
too.
yeah, you could be spraying my compost teas and doing stuff, but to be full disclosure, that wasn't being used as a parking lot for some years. It was just super gravelly soil with a thin coat of kind of weeds and grass on it when we arrived. And so we basically stopped all the mowing in that area and allowed anything to come. And again, all that stuff that comes is helping to build the soils. So, but yes, about 4 years to build that berm pile and be ready to plant it.
Thank you.
So the other strategy is to, if you want to do it sooner, you could make holes and add some soil into the hole of the plant. And then as the plant grows, the rest of it's going to be decomposing, and then the roots will go into that. So if you want the speedy garden, that would be the way to do it.
And in one of those pictures, the woman was, I don't know if you noticed, she was spraying that pile of twigs. So that was kind of like a brush pile that included some leaves and did we have seaweed in there? Coffee grounds?
Yeah, we did have.
And some seaweed. And then it was like compost tea being sprayed on it to kind of inoculate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit, I think it's an alder
Mhm.
trees, I mean, they root underground and they come up every place, and isn't that an alder?
What is it?
They do.
Not really,
Not as
just a
sucker.
little.
Yeah, they don't sucker the same as some other things.
Yeah.
But
They
they're-
can do that a little bit.
People don't like them, but they're actually a really good, they serve the ecosystem quite well.
Yeah,
They're
they're
really
like
great
the
habitat.
first pollen in the spring for bees. Oh, I think because they associate them with wetlands, and for some reason they don't like wetlands.
I know when we
And they
put
can
that-
look a little messy.
They
if
do look
You're not
messy.
pruning them.
if you're not pruning them.
They're the ones that kind of grow underground, and you see a little stem coming up, and that's gonna be an alder, and I think it's an alder, then another one comes up.
Well, poplars do that.
Poplar.
Yeah, poplars do
Yeah,
that.
I got the wrong one,
Right.
poplar, yeah, so, talk about
That's a tough one to manage.
Yeah.
Just don't cut it one down, leave it alone, and
Yeah.
usually it stays in place. But the minute you cut a poplar, you'll probably have 1,000.
You'll probably have a lot more.
Coming up in your lawn
Poplars
the
all
next
over
year.
the place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
How long does the button bush, once you plant, does that grow a stick? I planted 3 sticks
Oh,
and some other stuff, and I got it from
the soil and
the
water.
place that went, Bucksport.
Uh-huh.
And not one of them did a thing.
So, yeah, where did you plant it?
Well, the button bush is down where we have a nightcap, it's all watered out. It was,
Mm.
that was good for water.
Yeah.
Right, it is.
So I guess I better buy it somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Those sticks are hit or miss.
yeah. And the other thing is, that is one that is actually pretty late to leaf out in the spring too. So a lot of people think they died over the winter.
Oh, no, we
But
planted
then-
this spring.
Okay,
Fast.
okay.
We planted them in May.
Oh,
And they're-
all right.
And they're
Well,
dying now?
We never saw anything come out.
oh, you didn't get any
Oh, okay.
leaves.
We did
it
all
might
new
have been
soil and fed it.
the way the sticks were stored or something,
Yeah.
but,
Okay,
yeah,
so
it might
so
have
if I
just been
buy
a
it
luck
again,
of
they
that.
may work.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are the top 3 hummingbird plants?
I think Minorda, bee
Yeah.
balm is one.
And that cardinal flower clearly is one.
Would
And
be
what
a good
else
one.
would be good hummingbirds?
Monarda was great if you wanted to take over your yard.
Yep, and I mean that, it mostly,
moves
it does
around.
spread a little bit by suckering, but it also seeds around a lot. So it's a lot like most of our garden plants, you know, we deadhead our other garden plants. And so if you deadhead the Monarda, it's not gonna seed around. So it's like people expect the natives to act like a garden plant, but they're not treating them like the natives. So yeah, if you are treated like a typical garden plant, you'd be deadheading and keeping it in its bounds. So yeah, but the Monarda will.
And maybe penstemon is another
Oh,
one
the
for
hummingbird
the
plant,
hummingbird.
the penstemon.
There's a
That would be a
native,
good one.
yeah. that's
Does that
another
have
one.
any kind of common name? It's just penstemon.
Beard
Oh,
tongue,
beard tongue,
beard tongue is the common name.
yeah. Because it has a long tubular like flower.
For a water bar, you were saying that you could use wood chips in between. Do you still have to dig the water bar into the ground? Do you still have to dig a trench, put the water bar in, and then use?
No, so the wood chips are acting in a similar fashion as the idea of a water bar. There's no water bar in there.
Okay,
You know,
that's
it
all.
also,
And the other
the
one-
water will run through it as well, because it's really there, I don't know if you know of construction sites where you see that filter fabric.
Mhm.
This erosion control mulch is in lieu of filter fabric. It can filter the water as it passes through. So
Yeah.
it will do 2 things. It will direct, if you're, got it really packed tight, it'll
Right.
direct some water, but it'll also filter it.
Okay, and just one other thing that I found with the sticks, if anybody has that, for watering houseplants, it's like a glass bulb and a tube that's got like a pointed open end, and you fill it with water, and you can stick it in your houseplants. They
Oh,
were
yeah,
all
yeah.
over a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've used them with stakes.
Oh.
You fill it, you put it near your stake, because
That's-
it's really hard to water them.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
it
a
is
great
really hard to
idea.
water. That's
And then
perfect
you
idea.
just refill it and refill it and
Yeah.
refill it, and I planted a whole bunch, and they all survived.
Ah, there we go.
That's a good,
Yes.
good tip. Thanks.
And what species were they? I'm just curious.
Silky Dogwood,
Yep.
Red Osier,
Great.
Pussy Willow, and there's another one. There's another dogwood, there's Silky and,
Red twig?
yes, that's it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, great.
Where do you get the stakes?
We usually get them from a company called Ernst,
Oh.
ERNST. And so they are in Pennsylvania, so unfortunately it comes kind of far and they have to ship. But if you have some of those plants on your property that you can cut, you can make your own stakes. So once you get some of those plants established, you can be cutting those and then planting those stakes in the ground. So it's important to do that early in the season. That you can't just do it anytime. But before the buds have broken, for sure, you need to cut them.
There's a nursery in Portland also, that sold them
Is
to
that
George's
Pearson?
Pond Association.
Is that Pearson?
At wholesale.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
Now
think
we
we
have to
did,
go
yes.
get them in April,
yeah.
and it was very
Right.
cold. But-
And you don't feel like planting them, but
No,
you do.
They were, you know,
Yeah.
not too
Right.
big and,
Yeah.
But they're a wholesale trade only, Pearson
yeah,
Nurseries.
but you know what, they let us do it because we were a nonprofit.
No, that's what I mean, a regular homeowner would have,
Right.
would
Maybe
not have
not,
that access.
Unless you had a homeowners association, but then you
Yeah.
have 501c3.
Well, if a lot of people are interested in those, you know, we could add those to the plant sale or something, or we could have a special thing early on.
Oh, that's an idea.
You know, like, because it's just a good way to get things established. If a lot of people are interested, you can just buy we could just buy 100 of a few different species, and then if people wanna, you know, they're only like, I don't know, $1 a piece or something, so they're not
Okay.
expensive.
Timing is really
Yeah,
important though.
it is all
So-
about timing.
So we have to, that would be a tricky thing to organize, but.
I'm not necessarily volunteering to do
Yeah.
it, but
But
let
maybe
us
someone
know.
else, like maybe Taunton, the Friends of Taunton Bay or.
wants to
you
do
know,
it or something, yeah.
French Smiths Bay Conservancy could do it too, yeah. Yes.
Do you ever work with the Wild Seed Project
Mhm.
in Portland?
Yeah, we know them, and Heather's come and done a seed workshop with us, and, you know, we're in communication pretty. In fact, Heather was in some of the earliest meetings when we were just thinking about having the native gardens in Blue House, so.
What about dealing with deer?
This year, they're so bad.
There's so many, okay, so we have many different strategies. We have taking a strong smelling soap and making little bags and sticking them around in the garden. There's this liquid deer fence, or, you know, different formulas. Switching the formulas that you can buy is often helpful, and then you can spray them on your plants and just follow the directions. Or you can start putting up fences, and especially in the winter, when,
Right.
you know, that would be a time when fences are helpful. Sometimes fishing line can be a simple solution.
It doesn't necessarily have to be strong, just a visual thing with the deer.
They just hit it, you know, and they just they don't see it. It's a struggle, it's really a struggle, and we're thinking about raising a lot of money so that we can put a deer fence around the whole property of the native garden. Because how can we have a demonstration garden if the deer are eating everything we want to show?
So garlic clips are another
Garlic,
thing,
yeah.
garlic scent.
I'm convinced that my black lab is my deterrent.
Well,
Yes.
that's something, dogs.
Dogs are
very
really helpful.
They are really
Yeah.
Very
helpful.
helpful.
Yeah.
I live in the woods and
Yeah.
never see a deer.
Right, right.
My lab is, you know, free to go any place she wants to go, so.
Yep.
That's true.
And I have all the flowers I want.
Do you sell dogs?
We don't.
I've had good luck with the deer sprays that you buy, but
Yeah.
only if you start early in the season and spray frequently early in the season, and it seems to train them to stay away from
Yeah.
the rest
Yeah.
of the season.
How many years have you been doing that?
10 years.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we've been doing that for a long time, but it's not working as well as it used to for us.
I use a couple different ones. I don't
Yeah,
know
you
if
have
that
to
helps.
switch.
Yeah,
Switch.
mixing it up with the
Yeah,
rotten egg one, you throw a little of the hot pepper spray in there, or the one with the cloves and garlic,
that
you know,
helps.
so it's like, oh, what's for dinner tonight?
As soon as I miss a year or miss early in the spring,
Yes.
I know it right
Yeah.
away.
yeah. I've always been a good, you know, we've used that a lot, and so,
I mean, those things, they smell bad when you spray them, but when they dry, they don't really smell to us humans, so it sounds really bad, and it isn't really fun to spray, but when you're done, you know, it doesn't last that
We
long
would
for
always-
us.
we'd always spray at the end of the day so we could go home and take a shower.
So maybe I missed it, but, and I did hear, you know, the live sticks ideas and things like that, but, I saw your pictures of, the perimeter drains draining
Oh, do you?
doing exactly that. And I'm wondering, there's some pine trees there, but of course,
Uh-huh.
their roots are getting more and more exposed. Is there any other suggestions you have for dealing
I
with
wonder
that
if you could just
situation?
shorten the drain.
And is there a place that you could,
I can
I
shorten the
don't-
drain for sure, but doesn't that just bring the runoff closer to the soil that it's gonna?
oh,
Right.
right, we
Change the
mean
runoff.
like drastically, like don't let it come out at the shore, have it come out somewhere else. Is
Yeah.
your property really flat? So that's
It's
why
got
it
a
has to
slight
come out like
incline.
that? Yeah, so.
Yeah,
The other
Yeah.
thing, I mean, you could try to deal with the water coming off your roof and stuff in another way so it doesn't make it down to the perimeter drain and come out at the shore. I mean,
Mm.
that might be one strategy.
Do you have gutters?
no, I don't. There's a stone bed
Yeah.
underneath the
And
eaves.
it's
So
all
that's
gonna
all
take
going
And
down
the
to the
drain is
perimeter
right under
drain.
the
Yeah.
stone.
Right.
Yeah.
Works great for draining stuff
Yeah.
away
Yeah.
from the
Right.
house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But
perfect.
the
in that
swale
respect.
garden, wouldn't that help that?
Yeah, the
They did
swale.
garden.
Well, he's already got his,
But
it's
I-
already set up so
it's
that it's
shoreline.
going down
Yeah.
into the perimeter drain, and the perimeter drain is several feet underground.
And
Right.
that's all
Yeah.
surrounded by really permeable stone and whatnot, so it
Yeah.
drains quickly
Yeah.
into the pipe and off. So it's
Exactly.
that get
Yeah.
away fast
Where,
mentality.
yeah, I know, get it away.
Get it away.
So how close to, where's daylight in relationship to your shoreline on that drain?
You mean, how far is it sticking out?
Well,
From
where does
the
it empty out
soil.
in relationship to the edge of your shore?
At his shore, he said.
It's
It's
right
right
on your
on
shore.
the
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it's
at,
right
he has
on-
3 of them coming
Oh my gosh.
We've got 3 of them all right next to each other.
Oh,
And where's the high tide?
It's just a few feet below.
yeah. Yeah, that's hard. I think I'd think about getting gutters and doing some infiltration,
Yeah.
system
Directly.
closer to the house,
Yeah.
you know, and letting it infiltrate and instead of going
Geez, I
out to
really
the
like
drain.
not having gutters.
I
A lot of
know,
people
you
do.
don't have to clean them.
Exactly.
I know,
Yeah,
and that's,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this is why people have these perimeter drains and that gut stone trench around your house, that's
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
But the gutters is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
That really might be the better of the evils.
Evil, right, right.
You'll still have water because there's groundwater.
Yes.
I mean, there might still be some water
Absolutely.
coming out those
Absolutely.
pipes,
There's
but
not-
this
It
would
would
be one
just
way to
reduce
lessen
it.
it,
It must.
yeah.
So a totally different question, and it has to do with getting wild blueberries started. I have some areas of lawn that I've considered converting to wild blueberries. It's sandy and full sun all day. Any thoughts on that?
Well, people do sell blueberry sod, but the problem with that is, oftentimes you have no idea where it's coming from, so you're taking it from one environment and putting it in potentially a different one, and it's had millions of years to adapt to this other environment, and then you're bringing it over here, and so we've had probably a 50% well, maybe more than 50, but we see places where, why did the blueberry die here and it never died there? It's just where it comes from, where it's landing.
Do you have any blueberry
Yeah.
currently on the property?
No, I don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you could start with plants too.
Yeah, you could-
The thing is, it does take it quite a while to spread,
Yeah.
but mowing it regularly or cutting the top back is gonna help it spread.
One thing we've started doing is getting wild sods, which is a mix of blueberry, bunchberries, sheep's laurel, sometimes wintergreen.
Wintergreen, yeah.
And depending on the sun's exposure, and then we just figure, okay, so there are 4 or 5 species of things in this sod, and one or more is gonna
It's
duke
gonna
it
be
out,
more
and they're gonna be more
Right.
successful.
Right.
And that kind of just allows it to adapt.
Do you call it wild sod?
It's known as wild sod, so it's a mix
Yeah.
of different species in the sod. Yeah.
And that will go over the top of gravel or sand? He's talking about sand.
Sandy
Most of
soil.
those
Soil.
things will work in those conditions, maybe the bunchberry not as much.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on, again, where it came from and how well adapted to your conditions it is.
But if
I mean,
it's
you
a-
never know where it comes from.
Right, so,
Unless you're transplanting it yourself.
and some of those species will be fine and some won't, but it's just a matter, you'll know you'll have something there.
Right.
with a septic
I
system.
second that. Well, it depends on how much A horizon you have and how much A horizon they're gonna sell you.
Right.
Your newly bought A horizon might become the B horizon for your next attempt.
I know.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good. But there are a lot of herbaceous plants that can take
Right.
those conditions too, rather than try for a woody
Right.
thing, like pussy toes and,
Very sandy soil.
or
yeah.
even the bearberry, which you can readily buy plants and that spreads a lot more quickly too. The bearberry is actually very nice, it's in the same family as the blueberry. Excuse me?
Bear.
Bear.
Bearberry. And
It's
then,
like a ground cover, I don't think we have any pictures.
And hay-scented fern also can
Yeah.
really just take off and be on sandy soils.
Yeah.
And it can be in the sun. Hay-scented is fine in the sun. And that's, like, once you have that, it grows, it's aggressive, so it grows quickly. And once you have it, you can be moving it around your property for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
Meadows of hay-scented if you want.
Yes.
Trying to take my notes. The building resiliency along shorelines. All I could get was the title. I don't know where it is. 'Cause
Oh.
The slide moved. really
Sorry,
quickly.
it's from the Cumberland County, is it Conservation District?
Coastal something, coastal, I'll see
I
if I
think
can find the slide.
if you just Google building resiliency and then Cumberland County, you'll find it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
That's the picture you chose.
let me see if I can find the slide.
There it is.
Coastal, Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District is another way of finding it. So I'll leave that up there for you to write.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we took up your time.